Someone once asked Fritz Perls, the feisty psychologist associated with the human potential movement, if he was saved. Perls quickly countered with, "I'm trying to figure out how to be spent." How to be spent. Jesus in today's gospel is traveling with a large crowd toward Jerusalem. If you recall in chapter 9 of Luke's gospel, Jesus, Luke reports, turned his face toward Jerusalem like flint. In other words, he turned toward Jerusalem with a determination to go there. Nothing was going to impede him on his journey. And so from chapter 9 all the way to chapter 19, those 10 chapters in Luke's gospel, Jesus is traveling through Galilee and then Judea to arrive at his fated place, Jerusalem. Suddenly, on this journey with large numbers of people following him, he turns toward them and tells them how they are to be spent and how much it's going to cost them to be his disciple. Nothing less than carrying the cross. Joseph Fitzmyer, in his massive 2-volume commentary on Luke's gospel, simply says the saying about carrying one's own cross is problematic. What an understatement. It's simply problematic. Why would Jesus use such an instrument for following him? An instrument of death, an instrument of capital punishment, an instrument reserved for those who were scorned upon the earth, scorned especially by the Romans. And why would Jesus use such an image for following him, coming at the end of one of the harshest sayings in the New Testament about hating mother, father, children, life itself? Only after Jesus' death on the cross does this saying begin to make sense. You have to understand how traumatized the early church was by the death of Jesus, how traumatized they were by the crucifixion. Anyone who experienced it, anyone who witnessed it, one psychologist said, would have had PTSD. So traumatic was that experience. And so the church as a collective body spent a lot of time reflecting on the nature of the Messiah's death, the Son of God who came to set us free, who came to give us life and life to the full, and yet had to endure the cross. And so in scouring the early documents that were recorded about the life of Jesus, they happened upon a verse in Matthew's Gospel, verse 29 of chapter 11. It's a much-loved verse where Jesus says, "Come unto me, all of you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will refresh you. Learn from me, for I am gentle, for I am meek and gentle of heart." And this saying, whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple, comes from this early Christian community's reflection on the death of Jesus. And so they compared this saying to Matthew 11:29, "Take my yoke upon you." And this is where Jesus is expressing the following of himself as bearing his yoke. Actually, it's the same verb form that's used in both instances, the one carrying the cross and the one carrying one's yoke, taking the yoke upon oneself. In other words, the comparison of Jesus invites the weary and burdened to come to him in order that they might find rest. Jesus is God's new law. His yoke, a Jewish image for obedience to the law, as Moses puts forth to the Israelites in the first reading from that we heard today. It's easy to those who accept it. His burden is no oppressive network of legal prescriptions, but the joy of a single call to love. The carrying of the yoke, which Jesus will help us carry himself, is the yoke of his love. And so this single call to love then lands upon us as something joyous, something that we are willing to do. And this single call to love, it might be translated today to mean leading a persistent and joyful life in a violent world. In a world where we're surrounded by violence all the time, that call to follow Jesus is this persistent and peaceful life that we live in the world around us. And so let us learn from Jesus today. He says, "Come unto me and take my yoke upon your shoulders and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble of heart." What does it mean to carry the cross? What does the cross reveal about the nature of God? What does the cross reveal about the nature of humanity? What does the cross reveal about the nature of discipleship? In the revelation of the cross, the great truth becomes obvious and overwhelming. The image of the crucified is telling us something about ourselves. The image of the crucified is telling us something about our journey toward transformation. For the cross reveals God to be self-giving, suffering love. The cross reveals something of the heart of God, and the heart of God is self-giving, suffering love. Since we need a transformative image in order to change, Jesus died to reveal to us the nature of the heart of God. The psychologist Carl Jung said that we need images in order to actually encounter profound change in our life. We used to call it conversion, but the better word is transformation. When Paul uses language such as, "You are now a new creation in Christ, you are reborn." As he says in Galatians, "The life I live now is not my own, but Christ living in me." And so we need these transformative images in order to experience real change, the change from an egoic operating system to a system whereby we are willing to give ourselves over to God, surrender ourselves to God, to be of use for God's kingdom, for God's glory, to bring change in God's world. And so, gazing upon the cross, we can actually see something of the heart of God and believe and be transformed by that image. For the cross reveals that God is the victim of history. Anything that we suffer, God has suffered first. Anything we feel, God has first felt. God is actively participating in my suffering, in our suffering, in the suffering of the world. Your suffering, my suffering, is the suffering of God. What Jesus does on the cross is to hold all of the pain of the world until it transforms him. We call it resurrection. And if we don't allow our pain to be transformed in us, then it's a certainty that we will transmit it. We will transmit it to others. And so the reason why Jesus is telling his disciples to carry their cross is to enter into the very pain of the world, just as God has entered into the pain of the world, and to hold the pain until it literally transforms us to be living images of the Christ in the world today. What a vocation. What a vocation God is giving each and every one of us, to be transformers of the pain of the world. I'll never forget, I had a former parishioner of mine, and I was working as a hospice chaplain at this time, and she was in the hospital with esophageal cancer of the esophagus. And it's one of the more painful cancers that one can be burdened with. And I would visit Diane, and it was difficult for her to talk. And obviously she was in a lot of pain. And I don't know what led me to ask her this, but I asked her, I said, Diane, how do you cope? How do you get through the pain of every day, And she said something quite remarkable. She said, well, I just think of some children in the world who have been abused. And I meditate on the abused children of the world. And I knew Diane, and I knew her family, and I knew she was not an abused child. She had a very loving family, very loving mother and sister. And how she landed on making her prayer encompass all the abuse that the children of the world endure on a daily basis. And she latched on to that, and she prayed for them, and that image transformed her. In the midst of all of the pain that she was experiencing, she embraced the pain of the world as a disciple of Jesus. What does Jesus on the cross do to hold the pain until it transforms him? He, on the cross, took all of that pain, and he simply said, into your hands I commend my spirit. I give back to you all of the love that is in my heart, in the midst of all of the pain that he was experiencing. When you have been through the pain, the hatred, the rejection, the betrayal, the abandonment, then you can go to that place and find out who really sustains you. You and I are invited to carry our cross and follow Jesus in order to surrender to the great compassion. Once we experience ourselves being held up in this sea of pain by the other, then and only then can we live in great compassion. Then and only then will we be confident in the outcome of life, that all life will be resurrected, that all life will be made beautiful, that all life will be made holy, and we will be grateful. There's a wonderful story that Basil Pennington tells in a small collection of short stories. It's called the Magical Mystical Monastery. And Basil Pennington has a disciple who's trying to figure out where the best place to pray is. And so this disciple, he goes to his church, and he finds a quiet time during the day and he prays. But as he's praying, he has all of these distractions, and all of the distractions are negative, all of these negative judgments that he has about family members and co-workers and friends and people that have hurt him in life. And he finds that that's not a good place to pray. So he finds an even quieter place like our resurrection chapel, and he goes in there and he prays. And once again, all of these distractions assault him, negative judgments about everyone and everything. And then he decides, well, maybe I should pray in nature. And he finds a quiet spot in nature, a peaceful garden. And once again, he's assaulted by all of these negative judgments about others. And so finally, he gets this idea to ask Jesus. And so he says, Jesus, in his prayers, I'm at my wit's end. I don't know where the best place to pray is. Tell me where I can go to pray. And he hears this inner voice that says, go into the heart of the Father. That's the best place to pray. And so there he goes, into the heart of the Father. And he prays from that specific place. And all of the judgments subside. Because in the heart of the Father, he sees the world through the Father's eyes. And he sees that everyone is a child of God. And that everyone is a sister and brother to him. And that finally, he has entered into the great compassion. The goal of the spiritual life, the goal of discipleship, is nothing less than compassion. To feel the suffering of the world and to enter into it and to hold it until it becomes something beautiful to behold. It becomes resurrected.